For more than a month, Maine has confronted the coronavirus, which is affecting all Maine people. Mainers living through this coronavirus economic slowdown are getting a glimpse of what happened in the Great Depression. Unemployment is soaring. Many are having trouble paying bills. Food pantries are seeing spikes in visits. Amanda Rector is the Maine State Economist. We've invited her to join us for some insight into all of this. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Have you ever come across economic conditions like this in Maine before?
So one of the things that has been particularly challenging is that often what we do when something happens in the economy is we look at the last time something similar happened to try to give us a sense of what we might expect going forward. We don't have anything like this to go back and look at. This really is a very, very unprecedented event, even in terms of, there's been more discussion about the 1918 pandemic, and you think back to that, the economy was vastly different at that point in time. So that even that doesn't give us any sort of a sense of what's happening in the economy today. So it's made it very, very challenging to try to do any sort of analysis or forecasting in this particular environment.
Well, we can certainly look back, and we certainly can say, I think, the state was in pretty good shape. Economically, the state government was in pretty good shape going into this, was it not?
That's been one of the good things that has set us up for this, is that the economy was in pretty good shape. And so as opposed to the Great Recession, where things had been sort of deteriorating month after month after month, we were in pretty good shape. And then all of a sudden, the economy basically went into timeout and things stopped very, very abruptly. So we were in good shape, both in terms of having a good budget stabilization fund for state government to help fill some of the revenue hole that we know is coming. And in terms of revenues continuing to come in very strongly right up until the sort of the time when effects of this hit. So that was a good jumping off point, I think, where we were at the end of 2019 and very, very beginning of 2020. But we're at the stage now where we are trying to catch up with what's been deteriorating over the recent weeks. And I know it feels like much longer. It's been a very short period of time in economic terms, at least. A lot of the data we rely on has a big lag. And so we're just now starting to get some of the first pieces of data that tell us what current conditions are like.
I know the governor has asked the revenue forecasting panels to reconvene for an update. What are the kinds of state revenues that are at risk at the moment?
So one of the biggest pieces, I'll say two of the biggest pieces are the income tax revenue lines. Certainly we rely very, very much on withholding revenues. That's essentially the money that if you're working that gets saved by the employer and paid directly to the state for your income tax portion. And then also sales tax, and particularly some of the large things like automobile sales. We rely on some of those big purchases that people maybe have been reluctant to make because of uncertainty, or have been physically unable to make because they can't go out and about. So those are sort of the two biggest pieces for at least the general fund side. And of course, another concern is related to highway fund revenue, where people obviously haven't been driving. We saw traffic count data plummet. That was actually one of the very first pieces of hard data we had, was traffic count data. Yeah. And so we used that as a proxy for sort of some of the estimations of what economic impacts might be. And so if you're not driving, we're not collecting gas tax revenues.
Yeah. You know, I mentioned the Great Depression, but this is fundamentally different in that it's a severe economic slowdown by choice. Is that going to matter to our ability to recover from this?
That's a really good point and a good question. You know, the fact of the matter is, when we were first starting to see the effects, I had a lot of people asking about the economic impacts, and I said, until we have a handle on the public health crisis, there's no sense even really thinking about the scope of the economic crisis because we have to deal with the public health crisis first.
Is Congress providing enough support for Mainers who are out of work, or at this point for the state, considering what it may need?
One of the biggest challenges that we're still facing, we have the $1.25 billion that have arrived from the federal government sitting in an account, but we don't yet have enough guidance on how that can be spent. And more importantly, can that be used to backfill revenues? At this point, the federal government has said, no, that can't be used to backfill revenues. Well, that's going to be a really important thing for the state going forward, is the ability to fill some of that hole so that we can continue to provide the services that are needed and are in greater demand at this point in time. Certainly we have that budget stabilization fund, so that provides us some cushion, and we're in much better shape economically speaking as we went into this, so that helps as well. But having the flexibility to use that to backfill some of those revenues and fill some of that hole is going to be really important to the state going forward. Hopefully that will be cleared up in the coming weeks.
Do you have any advice for individuals as they navigate this economic time?
Boy, you know, I think as much as possible, we really need to just be supportive of each other. We're all in this together. None of us are sort of isolated from this event that's happening. And so the ability to come through this together, even though we're physically separated, is going to make us stronger in the long run. I look at the things that a lot of companies and people are doing around the state that are really innovative, and they've had to completely change gears around what they're doing, but are finding ways to help. And that's been really helpful for me to think about is, you know, I look at all of the terrible economic news, but then it's, hey, you know what? There are companies that are changing their lines so that they can produce PPE and bringing people back in to work on that, and neighbors who are helping out with other neighbors and bringing school lunch deliveries to kids who are at home. There are a lot of things that people are doing that will make us stronger as a state in the long run.
It's interesting. I was talking to Professor Jim Brees from the University of Maine a few days ago, and he was pointing out that Maine has traditionally come out of recessions more slowly. And I kind of wonder whether you have any sense whether that would be the case this time, or perhaps some of these changes might mean a different paradigm this time.
It's really hard to say what the recovery is going to look like because we don't have anything like this to look back at in the past. I do think that we're very well positioned in a lot of respects. If you think about where we were going into this, one of our biggest challenges was finding enough workforce. We had jobs and we didn't have enough people to fill those jobs. Well, guess what? A lot of the people who have been in some of the large metro areas coming out of this may decide that Maine is a slightly more attractive place to live than they might have previously thought. We may see an influx of people moving into the state somewhere down the line, and that provides a lot of additional workforce that will help solve some of the problems that we had previously.
All right. Anything else you want to add that I've not asked you about?
The only other thing that I would say is that we are gearing up this summer to do the economic forecast update and the revenue forecast update. And we decided to wait until the summer to do that so that we had enough information to make those meetings really worthwhile, rather than pulling people in right off the bat and try to guess at what might happen. This gives us enough time to really develop some good understanding of what is happening, what might happen, pull some real numbers together, and provide a much more accurate, hopefully, forecast going forward.
I'm guessing that because this happened as late in the fiscal year as it does, there's not a lot of concern on the state level for finishing this fiscal year by June 30th, that really the big question marks are all in the next fiscal year.
Right. We seem to be hopefully in pretty good shape for this fiscal year. A lot of the challenge is going to be, how long does this last? What does the recovery look like? And what does the next fiscal year look like?
As in the one that starts July 1st.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fiscal year 2021 that starts July 1.
All right. Amanda Rector, the State Economist, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.